Crash Team Racing Nitro is the greatest kart racer ever made. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this game. Oh, for crying out loud, this is the 5th time in a row! What's up gamers, CTA here. At the 2018 Game Awards, a certain remake of a game called Crash Team Racing was announced, and I was honestly pretty excited. I did technically own the original, however I barely played it whatsoever, but the remake looked really good, so I was excited to give it a shot. I didn't really expect much. I thought I would enjoy the game fine enough, and I'd probably played around 20 hours before moving on. Crash Team Racing Nitro is the greatest kart racer that has ever been made. Suck it, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. CTR is probably the biggest surprise game for me this year. It's far from as accessible as Mario Kart. It takes ages just to get used to the bare basics of the game, and mastering it is a whole other task altogether. But I'll tell you what, mastering the game is genuinely one of the greatest feelings I have ever felt in a racing game. It's Mario Kart, but like 90% skill-based and unbelievably competitive. It's more than its amazing mechanics and controls that make the game stand out. The level design is absolutely top-notch and filled with some of the best shortcuts ever put into a kart racer. So I thought it'd be fun to rank every single track in the game from worst to best. Although a few things I want to say before we begin. First off, as previously stated, I barely played the original CTR, and I haven't played Crash Nitro Kart whatsoever. Therefore I will be judging every track in Nitro Field on its own accord rather than compared to the originals. Some tracks I might mention how different they are if it's drastic, but for the most part I'm judging them on Nitro Field and Nitro Field alone. And lastly, at the time of writing this, the current Grand Prix is the Rustland Grand Prix, therefore dating this recording. So I see nothing else to bring forth, so let's just get straight into it. Let's begin. Number 38, Dragon Mines. In my opinion, Dragon Mines is the worst track in the entire game, without question. But what's wrong with it, you may ask? If you're new to the game, or you've never played it, you probably think it's a decent track. Visually it looks good. They put a lot of effort into the background. They even added the dragon from Wrath of Cortex, which is a really nice touch. But there's one aspect that ruins the entire track. Anyone who's attended the Oxide Trials knows what I'm talking about. That one full 360-degree corner. That one corner is practically impossible to drift on at all, causing you to lose all speed as you awkwardly try to hop and brake around it. It is the most obnoxious turn in the entire game, and doing it quickly is a complete and utter nightmare. And what makes this track even worse is right after that you have such a small space with annoyingly placed pillars to build reserve backup so that you can gain Sacred Fire on the track's one and only boost panel. And to top it all off, the minecarts are complete RNG. They will be in a completely different spot every time you start the race, which will be the end of you the game hates you. It is absolutely my least favorite track to play on in the entire game. The only track I genuinely do not like. Number 37, Coco Park. Coco Park is essentially a better version of your average circuit track in Mario Kart. In fact, it's basically just a better looking Royal Raceway. And I think that's a testament to how well designed the tracks are in CTR, that the second worst track in the game is better than a middle-of-the-road Mario Kart track. Honestly, there's nothing to it. It's very basic, with basically nothing going on. It's got one shortcut in the hill and grass, but that's about it. It's just a wide and spacious track for newcomers to get the hang of the game, and it works quite well. It's simple, but not a bad track, just a little boring. Number 36, Slide Coliseum. Slide Coliseum is kinda bland. It's a generic stadium raceway track, but the gimmick is there's a ton of turns everywhere. It's just more a track to get the hang of turning, even though I feel like many of the turns aren't very feasible for newcomers. It's a pretty boring track. I mean, I guess the giant holograms of the characters dancing is cool? Maybe? Number 35, Inferno Island. Inferno Island is practically unrecognizable to its original counterpart. The original Crash Nitro Kart Inferno Island looked very similar to Crash Cove, but here in Nitro Field, the entire aesthetic is practically changed. For starters, the whole track is at nighttime and the lighting complements the lava so much more. Plus they added in nitrous oxide's ship crashing into the ocean just because, and I think Velo in the moon. Aesthetically, I think the track looks great and better than Crash Cove. However, it's an extremely simple track. It's the first track of Crash Nitro Kart and all, but it's very basic in its layout despite the nice looking theme. Number 34, Crash Cove. And also the first track of CTR, Crash Cove is basically just a more fun Inferno Island. Again, it's a starting track, so there's very little to it, but it's a decent first track. Simple layout, fun and easy shortcut for beginners to get the hang of, and it looks very nice. I still think they could have done a little bit more with it, but it's still an iconic starter track. Number 33, Dingo Canyon. I'm not the biggest fan of Dingo Canyon in all honesty. Visually, I don't find it very interesting, and the layout is nothing special either. You have some simple turns, a broken road near some water, and a jump at the end next to the greenest water I've ever seen in a game. Also the fact that the corner next to the speed panel is ridiculously tight and very hard not to crash into a wall and lose all speed. Not to mention all the armadillos that travel back and forth can ruin all your speed. Number 32, Turbo Track. Turbo Track is very similar to Slide Coliseum, being a stadium raceway, but it's set in the day rather than night, and without the holograms. However, it's better than Slide Coliseum because it's way more fun to play on. The entire track is riddled with blue sacred fire panels and encourages you to go as fast as possible at all times. Although the 3 180-degree corners you have to brake on do kind of ruin the flow of the track's speed. And honestly, those 3 corners are what ruined the track for me. I think competitive players like this track, so hopefully it isn't too unpopular in opinion putting it this low. 31. Tiny Arena. Tiny Arena is just a standard dirt stadium track. It has a good atmosphere for its track type, but it's still just your average stadium track with tons of turns, bumps, and mud. Plus it drags on for a little too long if you ask me. It needs a bit more to stand out. 30. Oxide Station. I'm not sure if this is an unpopular opinion or not, but am I the only one who thinks Oxide Station is very underwhelming? Being the final track of CTR and Oxide's own turf, in a way trying to be the Rainbow Road of CTR, but it's a very underwhelming final track. For starters, it's only visually okay. It's just standard alien technology that doesn't do anything too crazy, and the layout itself is okay. It's got lots and lots of tight turns, but that's about the only gimmick of the track. Most of the turns are obnoxious as well. You can't even fall off the track because 95% of it has guardrails. I will say I do like the part where you jump through outer space and it cuts out the sound, followed immediately by a jump where you fall directly through the center of the track. But that's about it. It's not a bad track or anything, but as the final track of CTR, it's a big disappointment. Cortex Castle would have been a much better final track than this. 29. Jungle Boogie. Jungle Boogie is simply a small, simple, and enjoyable track. It's a good jungle temple track with a fun wooden bridge section through the forest, and it's got a nice easy shortcut to the left of the bridge after you jump. Not much to say about it besides the fact that I can actually remember its music. It's just decent. 28. Tiger Temple. Based on the temple levels from Crash 2, Tiger Temple is pretty unique. The course's shape is as simple as you can get. It's basically a figure 8. What makes it so interesting is that both ends of the track pass right by each other in the middle, plus it has one shortcut unlike any other in the entire game. For some reason, if you hit the door with a power-up, it will open up. And there's no other shortcut in the game that uses a mechanic like this, so it's kinda strange. If I had one complaint, it would be the annoying fire-spewing heads in the narrow sections that are already tricky enough to build speed in. But in the end, it's just kind of average. 27. Nina's Nightmare. I was a bit disappointed with Nina's Nightmare, to be honest. Pretty much all of the Nitro Fueled originals have such a high quality to them, but Nina's Nightmare felt pretty standard. For a haunted track, it doesn't do much to stick out from the crowd besides the giant pumpkin spider. I think the haunted house section was really cool, but it's such a small portion of the track. It's literally just 3 hallways and 2 corners. Just think how much cooler the level would have been if at least half of the level were in the haunted house. Plus there's only one single shortcut in the track, and it's just a simple hop over a gate. And to top it all off, the track does have Blue Sacred Fire, but it's practically impossible to maintain. It's still a decent track, but it could have been so much better. 26. Rouge Tubes. Perhaps the definition of a simple and fun track. I love the track visually. It's got tons of room for maneuvering and a high emphasis on Sacred Fire. It's just a really good early track. There really isn't much to say about it. I just think it's a fun track. 25. Meteor Gorge. I didn't like Meteor Gorge at first. At first, I thought it was ugly and way too basic and easy. The more I played it, the more it grew on me. Yeah, I think it's a little too gray, especially for a snow-themed level. And even the layout itself is nothing spectacular. But it's just a fun track to race on that's built well for Sacred Fire. 24. Blizzard Bluff. Blizzard Bluff was almost much lower on this list, to be honest. It does practically nothing to stand out as a snow track. Just some brown canyons with a rolling boulder and a frozen lake. It's actually pretty basic. A simple design and a simple layout. However, Blizzard Bluff is the embodiment of how a single shortcut can save the whole track, because it has one of my favorite shortcuts in the game. Back when I was new to the game, I always felt like that one jump across the lake was possible, but every time I would just barely miss the jump. But that was the shortcut that made me learn the importance of maintaining speed in Sacred Fire, and is still one of my favorite shortcuts to pull off. Without it, I would not like the track that much. 23. Mystery Caves. Mystery Caves is actually one of the earliest tracks in the game, and it's not half bad. The track looks really good, with the crystalline caves and rivers that lead into the ruins surrounded by lava. It's a pretty easy track to gain speed in with a considerable amount of space. It's got jumping fire in front of 3 ramps back to back, and of course turtles you can jump off of. It's just a simple and solid track. 22. Barren Ruins. What in the world is this track? What is this theme supposed to be? Just, what? How am I even supposed to describe Barren Ruins? It's an ice level, but with a stone and mechanical seahorse inspired ruins, a lava sea, I think a frozen underwater section, and a giant seahorse cannon? This track is just weird. It doesn't really have any major shortcuts or anything to it, but yet I still think it's a fun track to race on. I just simply want to know what was going through their heads when they were designing this thing. 21. Spyro Circuit. Who would have thought after all these years, Spyro and Crash would finally get a proper crossover? Spyro Circuit is one of the few Grand Prix tracks added to Nitro Field. It's pretty cool seeing Spyro locations like Library and Mountain. Don't have me, I've only played Spyro once, I don't remember the names. But they're all connected through teleporters. Even the Wumpa Fruit have been changed to gems, and Sparks is the invincibility power-up. Unfortunately, as cool as it is to see Spyro nods, the track is fairly straightforward, and only has one shortcut, being the curb skip. It's a fun track to race on, but it's nothing spectacular. Would have been nice to see a bit more to it. 20. Thunderstruck. Thunderstruck is kind of a weird track. It's not like anything I've seen before. It's like a giant beanstalk in the middle of some old ruins during a very green thunderstorm. There's lots of turns, jumps, a half pipe, and best of all, it has Blue Sacred Fire. However, its biggest gimmick is simultaneously its worst aspect: the spinning spike logs. These things will absolutely ruin all of your momentum and placement. It is complete luck if you can avoid them, and maintaining Blue Sacred Fire is unbelievably hard. It could have been so much better without them. 19. Assembly Lane. I have a hard time explaining why I like Assembly Lane, I just do. It's like a robot factory mixed with a dirt stadium. The outside has lots of dirt mounds and a cool track skip, and then in the factory there's a split path where you can either take the risk going through the conveyor belt, but risk getting squished, or go off to the side and get an item in safety. And finally at the outside again, you're essentially driving on the wall before you plummet back down to the beginning of the track. There's plenty of room to drift, the shortcuts are fun, visually I think it's interesting, I think it's just a fun track. 18. Android Alley. As I've said before, I have not played the original Crash Nitro Kart, but I have seen footage of it, and Android Alley is completely unrecognizable. It's a futuristic track, but has a different aesthetic than that of the future levels of Warp. Android Alley, simply put, is just really good. There's lots of room for maneuvering, which makes it a great track for Sacred Fire. There's even a train that will plow through whoever is in its way regardless if they have invincibility or not. It's fast, it's fun, and the only thing it really needs is Blue Sacred Fire. 17. Koala Carnival. Koala Carnival was a new Grand Prix track added to Nitro Field, and it's pretty good. The layout is fairly simple, a glorified oval even, but it makes up for it with its aesthetic and the fact that it's a Blue Sacred Fire track. Think Rainbow Road meets a circus, and that's Koala Carnival. There's so much going on in the background, the track is so colorful. Without Blue Sacred Fire, I do think the track would only be alright, but because it's designed around it, and because it's really easy to keep it going the entire race, I really enjoy it. 16. Tiny Temple. Tiny Temple is a blast. By itself is a really decent track. The Golden Temple in the night sky looks really good, and it's got a solid layout. But what makes it great is that it's a Blue Sacred Fire track. Like Koala Carnival, it is more than just a track that happens to have Blue Sacred Fire on it. Tiny Temple feels like it was built around it. It's a great track to learn how to master Blue Sacred Fire, and a track you can feasibly maintain at the duration of the entire race. Provided the fire doesn't screw you over. Great track. 15. Gingerbread Joyride. Gingerbread Joyride is one of the more recent tracks added to Nitro Field, and for a winter-themed track, it's not half bad. Rather than being a standard ice level, the whole track is a giant gingerbread village, and it really works with its theme. There's tons of upward 90-degree turns and a fun jump across a giant gap, but at first, I only thought it was okay. However, guess what? It's a Blue Sacred Fire track, of course. The only thing that really ruins the track for me are the sumo jellies at the end. I really think they could have done without them. And while the other shortcut is cool, I personally find it extremely hard not to accidentally hit an invisible wall and lose all reserve. Maybe I'm just bad, I don't know. 14. Mega Mix Mania. At the time of writing this, Mega Mix Mania is the most recent track added to Nitro Field. And frankly, I'm not 100% sure how I'm supposed to feel about it. For starters, I do love the track visually. That colorful and rusty Mad Max inspired apocalyptic ruins look really cool, and I think the track is fun to drive on, it has some good shortcuts, and Blue Sacred Fire. However, there's actually some pretty major flaws that hold it back. Towards the end of the track, it feels way too cluttered, like they threw too many obstacles around for the sake of variety. Lots of tracks you can get the hang of the layout easily, but Mega Mix Mania took several attempts just to get the layout down and how to even get through all that clutter. Especially that tire and all those mines. I have gotten used to them and how I'm supposed to drive around them, but I still think it's way too cluttered. Which is a shame, because I do think the track would have been way better without it, and maybe even rank higher on the list. Maybe as time goes on, I'll be able to figure out a definitive placement. 13. Hyper Spaceway. Hyper Spaceway is the final track of Crash Nitro Kart, but compared to Oxide Station, this is a proper final track. Hyper Spaceway is a giant space stadium, but it's split into several different areas via teleporters. But hey, what is that blue stuff coming out of the exhaust right there? Hey, it's a Blue Sacred Fire track! Plus, I absolutely love one of the shortcuts. You can jump off the cliff onto another part of the track. However, if you're attentive enough, instead of continuing on to the track, if you go the opposite way, you can fly off another ramp, skipping a huge portion of the track. It can be slightly hard getting enough reserve in a couple areas, but it's still a very fast and chaotic track. 12. Out of Time. Out of Time is an interesting case. Initially, I thought it was okay. I liked the new revamped Time Citadel in the center, but the rest of the track was just a barren wasteland with not much going on. However, the shortcuts completely saved this track for me. Jumping over the fence is one of the most precise shortcuts in the game, and it doesn't even feel intended, but yet it's still a dev-intended skip and it feels amazing mastering. Plus the other shortcut is very fun. Out of Time is a make or break track. If you make any mistakes, there is no return, and you lost if your opponent didn't make the same mistakes. 11. Polar Pass. Polar Pass is an example of a snow level done right. Aesthetically, I think it's the best ice level in the game, and it's a direct reference to the snow levels of Crash 2, even to the point of including the Nightmare Mama Bear encased in ice. It's a bit on the long side, but in a good way, and has multiple awesome shortcuts, my personal favorite being the lake skip. It does have blue sacred fire, but I can never maintain it past the figure 8. Number 10, Twilight Tour. Twilight Tour was actually the very first Grand Prix track added to Nitro Fueled. Visually, I absolutely love this track, since it's based off the Egyptian and Arabian levels of Crash Warped. However, initially, I was disappointed with it. It had practically no interesting shortcuts to make the track stand out. However, it's amazingly designed around Blue Sacred Fire, and it's so much fun to race on. It was actually the first track I learned how to maintain Blue Sacred Fire for the duration of the entire race. If I have one complaint though, it's the flying carpet guy that will occasionally fly past the boost ramp. He doesn't interrupt often, but I have lost races and time trials to him before, and I really think the track did not need him. 9. Hot Air Skyway. Hot Air Skyway, a CTR classic. Hot Air Skyway is essentially the Rainbow Road of the original CTR because of the multitude of turns and lack of guardrails. It's a fun track to race on with a few decent shortcuts, and I love it visually, a floating casino blimp above the clouds. And guess what? Blue Sacred Fire. 8. Prehistoric Playground. Prehistoric Playground is a prime example of how solid the Nitro Fueled originals are. For a prehistoric theme, this is the best iteration I've seen of that theme in a game. It's got it all. Canyons, fossils, waterfalls, dinosaurs, geysers, and deep caves. The only thing it's missing to make it complete is a volcano or lava. Much better than Mario Kart's equivalent Dino Jungle. And to make it even better, it's a Blue Sacred Fire track, of course. However, my biggest complaint with it is how little room there is to hit the Blue Sacred Fire boost pad. Maybe I'm just bad, but I always struggle to not hit the wall and lose all reserve. 7. Clockwork Wumpa. Clockwork Wumpa is essentially a much calmer Cortex castle. The track is filled with multiple upwards 90-degree turns and rotating gears. It's essentially a giant clock tower that's apparently being used as a Wumpa Juice refinery. It's a challenging track with fun shortcuts and crazy turns. Honestly, not much to say about it, I just really like it. 6. Papu's Pyramid. Papu's Pyramid is perhaps the most iconic and recognizable track in the entire game. It was the first track that was shown off at the game's reveal and is even on the cover art of the game. But for good reason, because the track is great. It's a great competitive track with tons of tricky shortcuts and 4 upwards narrow 90-degree turns back to back. It is a bit overwhelming for newcomers, and frankly I think it's way too hard for being a medium track. But once you master it, it is one of the best in the game. 5. Deep Sea Driving. Terrible pun for a name aside, Deep Sea Driving is easily one of my favorite tracks. Deep Sea Driving is set in a mining cavern deep under the ocean, while under attack from a giant kraken. But what makes it so good is simply how incredibly fast the track is. There's Blue Sacred Fire panels everywhere, and the track is a complete blast. Alas, it is not perfect. My biggest issues during the tube section of the track, even besides the fact it can be very easy to lose reserve in it, the rotating blades at the end are practically impossible to avoid and require pure luck not to get hit by them. That's the only change I would make. 4. Cortex Castle. Cortex Castle is perhaps the most infamous CTR track for how hard it is for newcomers. Cortex Castle is honestly the hardest track to get hang of casually due to the fact that every single corner is at least 90 degrees. You must master air braking if you want even the slightest chance of making it through it unscathed. It will test your skills in maneuvering to the max, and it feels amazing to master. There's not much in terms of shortcuts aside from that extremely simple jump across the gap, and even though there is a Blue Sacred Fire panel, it's practically impossible to maintain it for long. And hey, there's a lot of detail within the background. Just look at those stained glass Oh no. Oh, I wish I could unsee that. Ah! 3. Sewer Speedway. From the moment I first played it, I instantly fell in love with Sewer Speedway. It's based on the sewer levels in Crash 2, and the track looks amazing. There's a split path in the beginning, and the majority of the track is a giant half-pipe. There's tons of room for maneuvering, and that shortcut. Oh, that shortcut. Truly, the best shortcut in the game where you jump up the half-pipe into the hidden route above. As a newcomer, this was one of the hardest tricks to learn, and seeing it always set myself a goal to achieve. To master the infamous Sewer Speedway skip. And I'll tell you what, finally getting consistent at it was one of the best feelings in the game. And frankly, Super Speedway was always one of my favorite tracks even before I mastered the shortcut. And the craziest thing is, it's one of the earliest tracks in the game. Truly, one of the best tracks in CTR. Number 2, Engine Labs. And now for the actual best track in CTR, Engine Labs is easily my favorite track of the original game. I love how the track looks. The red and green mechanical factory looks awesome. I'm pretty sure it's based on Crash 1, but I could be mistaken there. Engine Labs is so much fun to play. It's like a slightly calmer Cortex Castle. This time only 90% of the corners are 90 degrees. I love the almost warping blue Sacred Fire tunnel. And did I mention this track is fast? Blue Sacred Fire, baby, and it is so satisfying to get right. It's completely feasible to maintain it the whole time, but it's not going to be easy. I just love it. Best track of the original CTR without question. But what does that leave number 1 as? Number 1, Electron Avenue. Finally, my pick for the absolute best track in the game, without question, is Electron Avenue. It has absolutely everything. It looks incredible, and its style is unparalleled. You can't tell me Electron Avenue doesn't look amazing. But it's so much fun to race on. Literally, the first thing you do is launch off the track and land about 100 feet down. I've mentioned all throughout the video Blue Sacred Fire tracks, but no track embodies that more than Electron Avenue. It feels like it was designed solely for the purpose of going as fast as possible, because practically every single boost panel is a Blue Sacred Fire one. Plus, it's arguably the longest track in the game. Your skill will be put to the absolute limit when mastering it. I mean, sure, you can argue there's only one shortcut, but honestly, it doesn't matter. Electron Avenue feels like the ultimate track in CTR Nitro Field, and Rainbow Road wishes it could be this amazing. 10 out of 10 track.